This tip is prompted by something a student at my finishing class at the conference in South Carolina showed me. And this is an alternate way to do Kitchener stitch that involves using a knitting needle, knitting it off, rather than using a tapestry needle. And it has some advantages of the other method. You can see I've got two different colors here, and I have the wrong side rows facing, and I have the right side rows out. And I'm going to get started with this. I have a piece of yarn that I'm using a different color for, and I'm going to start. Now, like traditional Kitchener, you begin this by working these two preliminary stitches. And in this case, if you've done this with a knitting needle or a tapestry needle before, generally what you're doing is you're going to be purling the first one. But this is exactly the reverse. I knit into the stitch and I pull the yarn through. Now I'm careful to hold my yarn tail so I don't pull it out. And then I'm going to go to my back needle and I'm going to purl that stitch. And instead of keeping that yarn on my needle, I'm going to pull it through. Now one thing I'm going to do is I'm not going to pull that yarn tight, 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 because that's going to be my Kitchener. And if I pull it tight, 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 it's not going to look right. Now I'm ready to continue what I'm going to do through to the end. I'm going to purl into that first stitch. And I'm going to pull the yarn loose. And I'm going to be careful not to pull too tight. I'm going to drop that stitch, and now I'm going to knit into the next stitch. And again, I'm careful not to pull this too tight, and I'm going to pull my yarn through. Now I'm ready to go to the stitches on the back needle. I'm going to knit into that first stitch, and I'm going to pull the yarn. Now I'm having to move. Don't drop your needles. Okay, back to where I was. I've pulled my yarn through. I'm going to drop that stitch, and now I'm going to purl this next stitch. Purl, but instead of keeping the loop on the yarn, I'm going to pull it through. Now I'm ready to do the next one. I'm going to purl this next stitch, pull the yarn through, drop it, knit, pull the yarn through, leave it on the needle. Next one, I'm going to knit, and you want to make sure you have the yarn when you're knitting underneath. Pull the yarn through, drop, then purl the next stitch and pull the yarn through. Now let's see if I'm getting enough of this that I can look at it. And I'm getting a little bit of enough. And you can see that this is starting to look like Kitchener. I'll show you again in a minute. I'm going to purl this stitch, first stitch on the first needle in front, pull. It's better if you pull the yarn through and then drop a stitch. Purl the yarn through, drop the stitch. Now I'm going to knit and pull the yarn through, leave it on the needle. Now I'm ready for my back stitch. I'm going to knit, pull the yarn through, and then drop. Now I'm going to purl and pull the yarn through. And you can see that this is starting to look like Kitchener. And the advantage is that it's looking pretty much the same size as my needles. Now admittedly, this took me some practice to do, but it looks more like Kitchener immediately than when I've done it with a tapestry needle. I'm working on the stitches for my front. I'm going to purl that first stitch, pull it through, don't want to pull it too tight, drop, then I'm going to knit, pull it through. I'm going to, knit, old habits die hard, pull it through, drop, purl. Now I'm going to pause this for just a second, pull it through until I get to the end, and I can show you what this looks like. Okay, I'm back and I've just got 3 stitches left, and you can see how nice this is looking, and I have not manipulated this at all. I've just carefully not pulled tight. So I'm back to my stitches on my first needle. I'm purling, I'm pulling through. Don't want to split the yarn like that. Drop, and then knit and pull through. Now my back needle, I'm going to knit, pull through, drop, and purl the next one. Leave on the needle. Okay, purl, almost done. Oops, you can see I pulled a little too tight there, so I'm going to have a little bit of cleanup to do over there. Purl, purl, pull the yarn through, drop, and my yarn tail is here, which is why that coral stitch is so big. Knit, pull the yarn through. So when you get to the last 2 stitches, you go on as normal until you only have 1 stitch on the needle. I'm going to knit, pull through, and then drop, and then purl, pull through. And what I do is I finish it up by doing the first step. I'm going to purl that last stitch, pull the yarn through, and I'm going to drop that needle. And then for the remaining stitch, I'm going to knit, pull the yarn through, and drop. Now, of course, I'm going to have some cleanup, but not much. That looks pretty darn good. Now, my yarn tail is over here. That's why those stitches are a bit bigger. And I'll just work those through since I have a loose end there. And same over on the other side. But you can see, this is pretty nice looking Kishner stitch. I've got to say I like this technique. In my blog, I'll have the steps written out, and I'll also give credit to the actual person who showed me this. So check that out on arendaholiday.com.